Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. And that great chant is a very ancient chant.
Very ancient chant.
I'm not sure if the Bhagavad Gita was the very first book that was referenced in. Like with all these Indian or Hindu books, like the Bhagavad Gita is like 5,000 years old or something like that. So 3,000 years before Christ himself walked the earth. So it's a pretty old book. But that chant has a very interesting quality, and you see a lot of hippies, using it. There's nothing wrong with that, obviously, but I think I was thinking about this the other day.
It's much more sacred than what it may
yes.
be on the surface.
And I was thinking the other day, like in our videos, I do that a lot, and I hope I don't misconstrue that it's something like kind of, frivolous. It's really not.
Yeah, man. I just want to say real quick.
It's powerful.
To kind of touch on what he just said. Before we actually start the video itself, he'll say, I do this as a way to get to that kind of state of consciousness. It takes you straight to the divine, and that's a way that we can actually go from there and talk about the various things we may have to touch on.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as the idea has always fascinated me, even when I was a kid, that I may be able to configure my voice in a certain way to create a certain effect, that I may be able to configure my brain chemistry in a certain way to create a certain effect, or it's alchemy.
Yeah.
And what I get from the Hare Krishna chant, I find that is squeaky chair, but
it's like some substance's chair back in the day.
Yeah. But what I find with the Hare Krishna chant is it makes me much calmer, and I usually do, if I'm going really deep with it, helps if you have a little cannabis or kratom in your system.
Yeah.
Maybe an aid to doing this, and I'll visualize as I'm chanting this, and basically the Hare Krishna chant, it means basically praise Krishna. Krishna basically just meaning, the highest supreme being of the universe. Yeah. That's what Krishna is, and there's many different ways that many different cultures have depicted the highest intelligence of the universe. And I'll imagine a white energy coming down unto me, and when I do that in combination with this chant, I really do think that we could be like, by visualizing, like when you visualize, you're working in the astral world. Okay. Mm-hmm. Anything that you can think of exists in the astral world, because the astral world is infinite. It's not bound by matter at all. So I think that when you do that, you're really inviting that into your space.
Oh,
and
real.
It's a purification, It's a purification, and you have anything to say, my good friend?
Man. Yeah, he was touching on something that not only these Eastern mystics and ancient shamans has passed down for fucking thousands of years, but I read some stuff by Anton LaVey. He talked about astral projection a lot, and it's a very real thing. And it seems that these plants, we'll get into these here in a second, but can take us to some places. The more you're getting to these realms, I really do. We mean this. It's insane how big it is out there. And I wanted to mention
That's a very good way to put it.
I really wanted to mention, and as we often kind of joke a lot back and forth about it, we say that we're trying to let the plants, speak through us and reveal the truth.
But if I like to think this is kind of a model that you can view this as. You know, the closest thing that, as humans, you know, that we can perceive um, to be God or the manifestation of God is nature.
Yeah.
You know, and the plant life.
It provides just that.
Yeah, the plants can be seen as the goddess because. So this is the idea about the goddess. You know, even the god comes from the goddess. You see, so the goddess is really everything. It's what all things draw nourishment from. And the plant life seems to be. It's a good way to think of it. It could be thought of as the goddess or the Gaian mind. And so the plant life is the manifestation, is the physical manifestation of the goddess in our world. And it would make sense that some of these plants, it's just like, you know, it's just like in some spiritual cosmologies, there's demons and there's angels. Same thing with plants. There's some plants that will kill you if you eat a gram of it. Those are the demons of the goddess world, you know? And then there's the angelic beings and the transcendent spirits of the plant world too, like, you know, kava, kratom, psilocybin mushrooms, marijuana. All these things are like pheromones that the Gaian mind sends out to the monkeys to tune us into this state of consciousness.
Yeah, man, that's you're touching on stuff. Man, I'm just so happy about. You know, I want to talk about this first of all. Yeah, we had a revelation on kava and kratom mix. Yeah, you know, it's the thing that I wanted to mention that was so profound is that a lot of people wanting to, you know, go down that path of mysticism, psychedelics, I feel a lot of people from a lot of things that I read overlook really amazing plants such as, you know, kratom, kava, cannabis, but they go straight and they start doing more research on psilocybin, which we've talked about before in other videos. Psilocybin definitely is the, you know,
center of the mandala,
the center of all of this. But the other day is when I had this revelation. It was I had just taken 2 shells of kava, followed by kratom ceremony.
And by shells, we mean plastic cups.
Plastic cups. We just like to sound pretty ancient when we talk about this. We wish we had shells. We might.
We need to buy some.
Yeah. And I said to myself, "Oh my dear God, this is not a joke." And I also thought, and we'll get into some of these various truths that it revealed. I said to myself, well, one, I cannot wait to me and him our next ceremony so I can bring forth these certain things. And the other thing that I said is, you know what, I want to do more for, you know, we both do, keeping these plants around to where we can continue to delve into these. And I want to say this, you know, for anybody who doesn't know us, not many do, but yeah, you know, we would, I had this kind of inspiration on a recent kratom ceremony. We should make us up some signs and boards and go out into the small town that we live in. Maybe we'll get to some of the so-called higher up officials in politics. You know, we may just start calling ourselves the disciples for kratom, possibly the warriors for kratom. All jokes aside, this plant's done so much for us.
It has. And
it's easy to overlook. I can understand why people would, but I want to tell you that if you're overlooking these plants, in the nicest way, you're kind of wrong. Because it's, I kind of want to, brother, get into that. What it revealed is, you know, there's throughout, I would imagine, since the beginning, people has, or at least whenever language has come forth, talked about, you know, they started seeing their the people that was around them dying, and later we had various religions that people looked to. That was also looked at as a safety net. We tend to look at Christianity as this, making sure we.
It's the opiate of religions.
Oh, for sure, I loved that. Who was it that we?
Not a very good character, but Karl Marx said that. But I think he was right.
Oh, he was right. You know what? A lot of these people, just like all of us, they have certain flaws that.
Yeah.
We all, to some degree, and that's
True.
the point of breaking free, depend upon our monkey gorilla instincts for a great many of things. And there's debate on this is all that there is, and then we're dead forever. What is that? What is that consciousness like? Is it sitting in a dark room asleep?
And what is no thing? I've said this before. Like, it implies a thingness to it, which it's kind of a paradox in itself. I think it's a very risky thing to just assume that there's just going to be nothing, because wouldn't that just be so nice?
That would just seem too easy.
Just to live however you want and just drift off into nothingness.
Let's add on to what you just said. Well,
not because you're going to go to hell, but because
when you get into these realms, whether plant induced or otherwise, possibly really going deep with some of these mystical teachings again, that was a lot of times derived by these plants, as we've mentioned before. A lot of the books that Crawley has written, he's used things such as mescaline for his ceremonies. But this revelation that I had the other day, it was so profound, and I got this strongest feeling. Oh my God, it hits so hard. I said, well, what is this plant trying to tell me? And that was, everybody that's alive right now was also alive at the beginning. We have continued to be the same group of people throughout the world, live over and over and over again until we start to awake.
Exactly.
And we join that one again. It's like the electric wizard. We die. We're alone again. Yeah. And then back together in one.
And even the times in our lives that are shit, and we're lost and we're confused, that is going to make the process of awakening that much better. I really do think that this life that we're in, it could be this beautiful synchronistic process in which we awaken. Like McKenna has that saying. He says, if you just drop all of your preconceived notions of how reality is, if you do that, you're hurling yourself into an abyss.
I think of this all the time, man.
And if nature loves courage, and how does nature reward courage? It rewards courage by removing obstacles. And when you hurl yourself into the abyss, you may just find that it's a feather bed. This universe supports us. It does.
Oh, man.
And it takes a surrender. And I think that's a big aspect of this.
I love that, dude. You're touching on stuff. I'm having so much euphoria on this talk, man. Sometimes we have these conversations, we're on Kratom and Kava, and it's easy to forget, oh, wait, I look over, oh, yeah, we're recording ourselves again. It's like, we have these talks and these conversations. I would like to add something to what he said, though. We are infinite beings. I know he's talked about this in other videos. I was watching a interview of Anton LaVey earlier, as I told you about, and the guy, he's just a classic cocksucker, man. He's just so despicable.
Yeah, he was on this talk show.
Yeah.
LaVey went on this talk show. He eventually stopped doing the talk shows.
Exactly.
Because there was just such... So, he was on this talk show in 1970, You know, having a civil discussion or trying to have a
and
civil discussion.
He was respectful.
Yeah,
the whole-
LaVey, he was not attacking the interviewer, and the way the interviewer was like attacking him on a personal level,
for sure.
and it was disgusting.
By the way he dressed, the way he presented. He even mentioned, listen to this. He mentioned, "Oh, you pronounced this word wrong," and LaVey said it doesn't matter. It's quite inferior to get into a game of semantics.
Yeah,
that's so true.
you're missing the point.
What is that?
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, whoever made this, where this language has come from, like little mispronunciations. Look, I cannot. I'm barely able to talk the way I can. I've never been able to. Whenever I try to, learn a new word and I want to put that into my next conversation, I
like
fail
Mike Tyson or
miserably.
something.
Exactly. That's not the point of it. But
No, it's not.
he says this interviewer asked LaVey, you're a Satanist. Do you worry about your spirit being doomed to go to hell forever? And LaVey says, no, absolutely not. I am infinite.
Yeah.
I've made arrangements. I will always live. LaVey is not with us in this dimension, but he went back to the beginning.
Yeah.
And
LaVey was such an important person because
man,
he blew away this rigid structure that had permeated our culture, and it gave a lot of people the opportunity to emancipate themselves from, this trauma that we all had by growing up in this Judeo-Christian culture.
The thing that I also like what he did, even if you didn't want to go into more of the mystic parts of that organization, I would like to look back into that video later. He talks about he doesn't just, he has a lot of different paths you can go down in this church. If I'm mistaken, I think that like Buddhism was one of the things that he gave lectures on. But the thing about this is, this goes back. I was blown away. There's so many different paths we can choose to. And you probably have some stuff you want to add on this because I remember.
Yeah.
But I'll say this real quick before he starts his next rant. we both rant, obviously, but so yeah. He at least wanted to present, look, at the very minimum, let's not live the way that culture has.
This not just adopt whatever the fuck our family is practicing. How about we emancipate ourselves from, the conditioning, and then go into the analysis of reality, and then see what we think without that net.
Going back, and I'll remind you what he's going to say here in a second, but let's just go back to Kratom for a minute. The truth is, why is this being attacked the way it is? These people, as we mentioned, that's under the illusion of being in their high-up positions, they don't want you to figure out the truth. They don't want you to think that everything, for the most part, in your life is.
They want you to worship at the altar of the state, not the altar of nature.
Let's really just get deep with this for a minute. These symbols of greed and power are the symbols that we need to destroy.
Capitalism sigils.
We have to X ourselves out from that.
Yeah.
Escaping that, getting away from it, even if you have to be in it every day, just knowing, that that's the illusion. That's the false.
The Maya.
That is the, you want to talk about the false gods. People, the thing is, do Christians, which is the religion that's, I feel like he has something to say too, the cat. Do they practice true, unconditional, the kind of love that
Krishna shows in the Bhagavad Gita?
Which maybe you should be the one to explain that. That he read some stuff to me earlier that, by the way, blew me away. I was having so much euphoria and being so moved. But this is what it is. All of this, judging Johnny Smith over here and his family because he didn't show up to church. Look, we have two, we can call them church services a week. We have our congregation.
And what that is we get together and we read and we take plants and we discuss and we get really deep into these things. And what I always like to say is I know a lot of people out there that are Christian, for example, and they they'll bow their head before they eat a lavish meal, and I always get the sense that they're not really do they really believe that they're connecting with the super mind? I don't think so.
It seems to be so out of context on the most watered down level.
Yes.
Oh my God, we know
it's not on an experiential
Let's
basis.
think about this for a minute. We are saying that we are praying to the Creator of who created us, who sent His Son Jesus to die on the cross. We can't comprehend the gruesome torture that He went through, and then just to be halfway eating a sandwich from Burger King. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lord, for this food. And
as you're indulging in one of the 7 deadly sins of gluttony.
Thank you for my wifey and my kids. I love my son Jimmy, and I hope he plays football one day. Yeah. No, look, he's touching on some good stuff, and look, this is really how we should look at things. True love, seeing everybody. Look, all of us, anybody who is watching this, anybody walking around outside, ourselves, we are all the same.
Yes.
And if you get mad and just cuss somebody out down the road, you're threatening to beat them up, you are getting mad at yourself.
Exactly.
That's maybe a part of you that you hate.
Right. And it's much easier to complain about the faults of other people than to deal with your own shit. People don't want to deal with their own shit. And getting back to the thing where we said we're all one. That's a big psychedelic saying. It's, and let me just kind of prove to you why we're all one. Take the model of the Big Bang, for example. The idea that the universe started out as small as the head of a pin, and it had blown outward, and over eons and eons, it structured itself, and the ingredients of life became possible. Life emerged, but we all came from that single point, you see, and we're all manifestations of that single point. We're literally all interconnected, and it's so insane how we divide ourselves from each other.
Yeah.
And we talked about what is the best way to contact this divinity, if you will. And there's an author named Constantinos, and he practices witchcraft, and he talks about you can think of the source as we'll make a water analogy here, okay? So if you're trying to find the source of the great water source, which all water comes from, all the streams, all the rivers, all the creeks, the easiest way to connect with that water source would be what is nearby. Go over here and go to the stream, and connect